So, I've been feeling quite irritable. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't have a good sleep last night. So I've been thinking about this whole trans people in sports thing. It's been bugging me. I don't know why. And so I want to talk about it. Um, so what do I think about it? I think trans people exist, right? There's a trans man, there's a trans woman, and I guess there are people who are non-binary. But I don't. I'm not gonna talk about that. Let me just talk about. Okay, let me just talk about sports. There's sports is divided into two categories. There's the men's sports. There's the women's sports. Um, Now the question is, and it usually like people talk about trans women. They rarely talk about trans men, and I think there's a kind of a bias there. So, so the way I was thinking about this is, you know, not like everyone's different, right? You have like people who are tall, people who are short, people who are, you know, muscular, people who are skinny, people who are, a little bit fat, and, so people come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Uh, so you can be a tall man, a short man, and same thing for women. And I think you understand what I'm saying. That people come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And what I would like to do is add to that category of coming in all shapes and sizes, uh, the notion of cis people and trans people. So you can say people are tall, people are short, people are, you know, la 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 la, and then you can also say people are cis, people are trans. So that's just another way in which people are different from one another. One of the attributes that makes a person who they are is, their gender. Um, that's a fact of their identity, and yeah. So, so on that basis, the fact that we come in all shapes and sizes, trans people, trans women should be allowed to compete in women's sports, and trans men should be allowed to compete in men's sports. Now, if if trans women have some kind of an advantage over cis women, well, get used to it because trans people exist. Uh, Let me put it this another way. A lot of the people who play basketball, they're very tall. Uh, you know, so when a short person can say, "Hey, that's not fair. How come, I can't play basketball because these people are so tall. I can't do anything about it." Well, the same way, when it comes to, let's say, women's sports, if trans women, let's say on average, have a bit of an advantage, or depending on the sport, let's say in running or something, if they might have an advantage over cis women, you like, you know, people, you just have to accept that there are some people who are going to have advantages over you. Like usually when you talk about athletics, usually women or men from, let's say, African American, or with that kind of a build, they have an advantage in running. Whether women, African American women have an advantage because of their development, their biology, their over most, let's say, um, I don't know, Chinese women. So anyway, so people accept that. I mean, usually when you think about swimming, like most people, African American, like they don't have their body is not made to swim. So are you gonna complain and say, "Oh well, that's unfair. Why can't I? Those people have an advantage in swimming over me." So similarly, now we have this. Now we are introducing into the sports arena trans people. So now, so let's say on average, some trans women might have an advantage over cis women on average in a sport like running. Okay. Um, and I'm okay with putting the home, the well, how they say that you have to be on hormones for 2 years or something. Okay, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that they even apply that to cis women, I guess, intersex, I guess. That's a decision the IOC or whatever sports bodies have made. Fine. Um, okay, they put that limitation. But the point is, even after being on those hormone restrictions, if it is found that trans women still have a bit of an advantage, I think that, well, my answer is tough. Tough. Okay, for all these years, trans people were, you know, they weren't even recognized as real people. People would always question their identity, and oh, you just there's no such thing as a trans woman. These people are, they've got some problems. So now we're moving to a world where trans people exist. So how do we? Now we are coming to accept that yes, trans people exist. Now, how do we deal with this? We can't simply say, oh, they don't exist. We don't have to deal with them. No, they exist. So, how do we accommodate their existence into the sports arena? And my view is that trans women should be allowed to compete in women's sports, and trans men should be allowed to compete in men's sports. So let's look at trans men. Again, like you might say, on average, even after going on hormone therapy for whatever, trans men might, on average, be at a disadvantage when compared to cis men, right? So, yeah, so when it comes to sports, yeah, some people have advantages as a group over other people. We already accept these differences. We already accept that some people of a certain race, ethnicity, whatever, have advantages in certain types of sports and compared to other people. Like say basketball, tall, height is an important thing. Um, Weightlifting, there, usually, I mean, in some sports, fit certain body types. So that's my view. I mean, society should just, you know, just accept that. And another thing is like when people use the term biological male, biological female, I don't like that term because whenever you, it's, I don't, whenever you use, I have a problem with that term because whenever you use the term male, a person, a lay person is going to hear that phrase and think man. They're going to think man or biological female, woman. So if you're talking about a trans woman, and in the context of this sporting discussion, if you're going to say, oh, it was biologically male, that's a very, that term is very, I don't think it's a term that should be used because what you're saying, and also when you precede it with biological, that tends to give the male side a kind of like more, how do I say this? You know how they say science is like, or science is fact and all that. So when you say biologically male, you're using this scientific term biology and male to describe this person. So when you say when you say a trans woman is biologically male, you're saying, oh, this person is actually a man, biologically male, but they live as a woman, gender. That's just a superficial thing, you know. So the term biological male has a connotation that you should be aware about. You can't just use that term and say, "Oh, I'm just being scientific." No, no, no. It's that term, male, is is a is a term particularly in the context of a discussion where the existence of a person's identity is itself at issue. When you say a trans woman is biologically male, you're de facto invalidating her identity. You're saying, oh, she's not really a woman, she's biologically male. That's not scientific. That's again, the scientists. We categorize things in a male, female, and what about intersex? And it's not that. Science, biology is not that simple as male, female, and how we choose to categorize things is also like can be contested. So, those are my thoughts. I mean, I've been stressing out over this. I don't know why I've been so preoccupied with this. I've seen some videos on this, and I'm like, yes, stop picking on trans women. Another thing I thought about is why are people picking on trans women? Why don't they talk about trans men? And I thought maybe the reason they pick on trans women is because there's this, maybe it's a way to undermine trans women's identity and say, oh, they're not women, they're men. And, I read a comment somewhere, and this is something I thought about myself, is that, oh, this is just a way for men, cis men, to protect women's sports by uh, protecting cis women's sport by keeping all of these weird trans men or weird trans women away and the white knighting or whatever. Um, but then again, I thought maybe anyway that concept of white knighting and all that's controversial. I get it. I'm not endorsing those discourses by bringing it up. But then it also occurred to me maybe the reason they pick on trans women is because they are women. Maybe it's a form of misogyny. you know, Usually women are picked on, right? And maybe the reason trans women are picked on is because they're women. Not because they're men, but maybe because they're women. And that's why they're being picked on. Anyway.